In a quiet suburban neighborhood, nestled beneath the shade of sprawling willow trees and lined with charming houses, a saga of power and defiance began to unfold. This neighborhood wasn't just a collection of homes. It was a tight-knit community, interconnected by aspirations, dreams, and the occasional stonewalling HOA. Among its inhabitants was a woman named Sylvia, a figure who epitomized the love for order and a stringent adherence to rules. Much like an autocrat ruling over her tiny kingdom, she relished in the authority bestowed upon her by the local Homeowners Association, HOA, a self-elected council that held dominion over even the minutest details of life in their enclave. I had recently moved into one of the charming, albeit modest homes on Maple Lane, excited about the new beginning this change in scenery promised. I had no inclination or desire to be part of the HOA, something I was clear about from the very start. I reveled in my autonomy, the freedom to decorate my land as I saw fit, to make decisions unshackled from rigid regulations. Little did I know that my simple longing for tranquility would soon turn into a bitter confrontation. The ballet of bureaucracy began with a crisp envelope materializing in my mailbox, its gold-lettered insignia glaring at me. It bore the title, Official Correspondence from Maple Valley HOA, and exuded an air of pompous authority. Within, I found a decree, an array of regulations and accompanying penalties referencing alleged violations. The first fine listed was for a supposed failure to maintain property aesthetics, with a $250 penalty stated in bold letters. I chuckled in disbelief, surveying my garden. The vibrant flowers stood in serene splendor, my lawn freshly manicured. I tossed the letter into the trash, dismissing it as a nuisance. However, this incident was merely the prelude. Over the following days, more letters creeped into my mailbox like unwelcome ghosts, each one more absurd than the last. A fine for unauthorized architectural modifications, another for excessive noise disturbances. Yet I was a night owl by nature, working late hours to meet the demands of my job. What sound could I have possibly produced in the deepest hours of night? Every notification seemed to rouse the laughter within me. I tossed them all aside, harboring the notion that this would eventually cease. But Sylvia was nothing if not persistent. One day, as I unpacked boxes in my front yard, I caught a glimpse of her with her clipboard, taking note of what I didn't know. Her disapproving eyes locked onto mine, projecting a palpable sense of authority. I approached her, arms crossed, sizing up the audacity of her demeanor. "Good afternoon. I believe you're aware of the outstanding fines against your property?" Sylvia began, voice layered with feigned politeness. "I'm not part of your HOA, Sylvia," I retorted, a mixture of disbelief and irritation shimmering in my tone. Her smile, once polite, morphed ever so slightly, hinting at the dark tides beneath her composed facade. "The guidelines exist to uphold our community's standards. It's essential for every homeowner's participation," she asserted. I couldn't suppress a laugh. "You call this tyranny of rules participation?" My words hung in the air, a contrast to her rigid expectations. She looked slightly rattled, but quickly masked it with a feigned calm. "It's just a friendly reminder. You wouldn't want to complicate things for yourself." Her words dripped with an unmistakable, thinly veiled threat. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Let me make myself clear. If I receive one more of these ridiculous notices, I will file a complaint for harassment." Her facade fractured briefly, the tension raising her chin as she fought the urge to react. Yet she recovered quickly and left, a determined glimmer dancing in her eyes. As I walked further into my home, I was convinced that the confrontation had stifled her obnoxious antics. Little did I realize how gravely mistaken I was. The next morning, I woke to a horrific sight in my front yard, a pile of trash spilled carelessly across the grass, as though someone had maliciously decided to defile my sanctuary. It escalated. Whispers behind my back grew louder, and soon neighbors exchanged pointed glances whenever I passed by. Convinced I was being judged solely based on her fabrications, I sought out a kind neighbor, Joe, who had lived in the community longer than I had. He had always been warm, a gem amidst the coldness of others. Joe leaned in closer during our chat, his voice just above a whisper. "You might want to keep your eyes peeled. Sylvia's been spreading stories about you, claiming you're trouble. I've even heard talk of a warrant." "A warrant?" I echoed, disbelief coursing through me. Joe grimaced. "Yeah, this isn't just petty HOA politics. It's defamation." The realization struck my heart, spiraling into dread. I needed to put an end to this madness, and soon. Not much later, a letter arrived marking the penultimate warning. My heart sank as I read the official-looking document claiming there was a warrant for my non-compliance with the HOA's demands, reinforced by bold, intimidating letters. But experience had taught me well, and as a seasoned investigator, I recognized the flimsy nature of the text. Determined to keep my calm, I wasn't going to give Sylvia the satisfaction of compliance. Instead, I waited patiently. I allowed her to make her next move, and, sure enough, it came swiftly. Days later, I found two burly figures in quasi-uniform, wielding clipboards and cheap badges standing against my property. They claimed affiliation to the HOA's enforcement unit, their eyes flickering nervously as they announced they were there to bring me in. "Show me the warrant." My voice rang out with a confidence I didn't initially feel. The shorter, stocky one stuttered, It's from the HOA." "Did the HOA issue arrest warrants?" I kept my voice steady, ensuring they felt the weight of my skepticism. The taller one hesitated, glancing at his partner. The silence lingered. "Well, we don't exactly. Now, do you care to explain why you two entered my property under false pretenses?" Taking a slow breath, I revealed my badge, a symbol of not only my authority, but of my determination to dismantle their charade once and for all. The shock on their faces was priceless. "You tried to detain a federal officer," I mused, my tone darkly comical. In fast motion, they turned, tails tucked, and fled my property, leaving behind their papers. I chuckled at their cowardice, but I knew they were the puppets in Sylvia's web of deception. It was time to take it to the next level. Diving into unwieldy depths of public records, I unveiled a labyrinth concealed beneath the facade of my neighborhood's quaint charm. Sylvia had schemed her way into building a personal empire of manipulation, extorting neighbors through fabricated fines, scripted arrests, and legal intimidation. Her tactics, as deceptive as they were well-crafted. As I peeled back layers on this fraudulent operation, evidence surfaced, which linked Sylvia to exploitative actions against other homeowners, including false assessments of their properties. Homes were vacated under threats of illegal actions based on her exaggerated claims. Eventually, I discovered a name, a local judge who had turned a blind eye to the illicit machinations, issuing rulings favoring Sylvia's agenda. Justice lay dormant, and I knew this web of deceit required an unwavering response. Armed with proof, I decided it was time for both the HOA and Sylvia to face the truth. It was meticulously planned. I pretended to be just another victim, playing by Sylvia's rules to lure her into a hall of her own deception for a fabled arbitration hearing. When that day rolled around, I entered the imitation courtroom, confronting Sylvia with an air of naive compliance, ready to catch her off guard. As she launched into her rehearsed melody of charges and threats, I remained docile, soaking in every word while suppressing my amusement. But it wasn't long before the sound of marching boots interrupted her cadence. Uniformed officers flooded the room, leaving her entirely taken aback. They showcased their authority with tangible presence, and I barely had to utter a word. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for orchestrating a deliberate fraud operation, impersonating federal officers, extorting homeowners, and conspiracy," the lead officer stated flatly, handcuffing Sylvia as she sputtered protestations of innocence. As she flailed against the unavoidable tide of justice about to sweep her away, my heart soared. The tension lifted from my shoulders. I knew this was just the beginning of erasing the oppression she had sowed among our ranks. Months passed, and under the weight of mounting evidence, Sylvia and her accomplices unraveled. The community united, their voices growing louder in protest against the injustice. The judges, the authorities, the disgruntled homeowners, the narrative twisted into a chorus for reinstating their rights against tyranny. Soon, the HOA crumbled, and Sylvia found herself on trial for a slew of charges that would define her legacy. The fear-mongering ruler with her iron grip was replaced by a nation of uniters, determined to restore balance and harmony. In the end, Sylvia didn't just lose her battle, she lost her war. As I walked past the vacant house once owned by Sylvia, now stripped of its hollow power, I couldn't help but feel a surge of victory over oppression. She learned too late that no one is invincible. And as I peered through the curtain of freedom, I finally embraced the notion of a peaceful tomorrow.